All right. All right. So all right. All right. First off, I want to give all praises and glory unto Yahweh, Washem Yahushai, Washem Makakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Shalom to the brothers in the highways and byways, pushing toward north sincerity and truth. The sisters, the believers, the helps, the hopeful elect. Shalom. This is the brother Aaron from the Jamaica camp. Come with another quick lesson. Shalom, shalom. All right. And this whole thing with Sikari, and not only the Sikari with with other men, you can see that whenever in the ancient history, um, you know, things went bad or there was an uprising or certain things happened, it was always because of niggas, who wanted preeminence. They are the ones who disrupted order. And the thing about it is they did it for their vain glory. They did it for themselves. They did it to for their own benefit, and it was all about pride, but it was never about the benefit of the whole congregation. It was always about boosting their ego. It was never about the common good, of the people. All right. So the first precept I'm gonna actually read is Ecclesiasticus chapter 7, verse verse 4. It says, "Seek not of the Lord preeminence, neither of the king the seat of honor." And that is what these men are doing. They're actually seeking preeminence. They're searching for it. They're power hungry. And if it's one thing, those who always, you say, hunger and fight for that power, most often aren't the ones that deserve it, because it's not from a sincere place. You know, the next precept I'm going to read, and especially Sikari, he always talks highly of Apostle Tahar, but he always disregards, the other apostles, and he speaks ill of them, you know, with like little to no regard. All right, when he's just a few years in this thing, he thinks that he's on their level, but he's nowhere there. This is Ecclesiasticus chapter 32 verse 9. It says, "If thou be among great men, make not thyself equal with them, and when ancient men are in place, use not many words." But that level of humility, he doesn't have it, or they don't have it. And we're going to get a few examples, from the book of Maccabees, where you had men who came up against righteous men and pretty much caused the whole nation, to be afflicted. All right. So let me start with Second Maccabees chapter 3, and I'll start at verse 1. It says, "When the holy city was inhabited with all peace, everything was good. And when the laws were kept very well, because of the godliness of Onias, the high priest, and his hatred of wickedness, it came to pass that even the kings themselves did honor the place and magnify the temple with their best gifts. Insomuch that Seleucus of Asia of his own revenue bare all the cost belonging to the service of sacrifice. But one Simeon of the tribe of Benjamin, who was made governor of the temple, fell out with the high priest about disorder in the city." Good precept, right? We'll get it in a sec, right? So it says what he fell. Simeon fell out with with Onias, because of what the disorder in the city, right? And when he could not overcome Onias, he got him to Apollonius, the son of Thrace, who, when this governor of Cilicia and Phinus, and told him that the sanctuary in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches, which did not pertain to the account of the sacrifice, was innumerable, and that it was possible to bring it all into the king's hand. Why? Why would you do that? Right? So just because he couldn't overcome the righteous priests, he went to the heathen, told them that, look, there's a lot of money in the temple that you can actually bring into the king's hand. All because of what? Preeminence. Right? It says, now, when Apollonius came to the king and had shewed him of the money whereof he was told, the king chose out Helidorus his treasurer and sent him with a commandment to bring him the foresaid money. So that is why, Helidorus, end up going to Jerusalem for the treasury, and, they went and spoke to the high priest. The high priest was actually telling that, look, that the money is really for was for the relief of widows and fatherless children. That was what the money was for. All right. And then let me verse 11 says, I'm going to jump around. It says, and that some of it belonged to the Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, a man of the great dignity, and not as that wicked Simon had misinformed. The sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver and 200 of gold. All right, let me just jump around a bit. All right, so it says, right, jump into verse first and says, so that day which he appointed, because he said that, look, I understand what you're saying, but the king sent me for the money. I have to take the money, right? It says, so that the day which he appointed, he entered into order this matter, wherefore there was no small agony throughout the whole city. Exactly. Imagine, everything is good. Then you see this heathen come, decide that, look, he's going to take all of the money from the treasury of the temple to take to the king. What was the children and the fatherless going to do? It wasn't like, it was actually for the service of the temple. But just out of spite, this man went and brought this news. And guess what it caused? It caused, it pretty much caused trouble, because now the priest is at odds with what about to take place. The temple is about to technically, be robbed or to be spoiled, right? Giving up the temple for a spoil, right? Right. Let me just continue to read here. Right. It says, but the priests protesting themselves before the altar in the priest's vestment, call unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things given to he. Slakia. Call unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things given to he kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as committed them to be kept. Then whoso had looked in the high priest's face, it would have wounded his heart, for his countenance and the changing of his color declared the inward agony of his mind. All right. For the man was so compassed with fear and horror of the body, that it was manifest to them that looked on him what sorrow he had now in his heart. Others ran flocking out to their houses to the general supplication, because the place was like to come into contempt. All right, so they all, they prayed, and pretty much, the angels came. They pretty much beat the hell out of Helidorus, scourged him, and pretty much, sent him back. Right. As a matter of fact, it says, and Helidorus fell suddenly onto the ground and was compassed with great darkness. But when they that were with him took him up and put him into a litter, thus him that lately came with a great train and with all his guard into the said treasury, they carried out, being unable to help himself with his weapons, and manifestly they acknowledged the power of God. All right. Now here's what happened. It says, but they praised the Lord that had miraculously honored his own place for the temple, with which a little afore was full of fear and trouble, when the Almighty Lord appeared, was filled with joy and gladness. Now then straightway certain of Helidorius' friends prayed Ananias that he would call upon the Most High to grant him his life, who lay ready to give up the ghost. So the high priest, suspecting lest the king should misconceive that some treachery had been done to Helidorius by the Jews, offered a sacrifice for the health of the man. All right. It says, now as the high priest was making an atonement, the same young man in the same clothing appeared and stood beside Helidorius, saying, give Ananias the high priest great thanks, in so much as for his sake the Lord had granted thee life. All right. So pretty much that's what happened. All right. Pretty much that's what happened. All because what? A man wanted to overcome the high priest, and they were delivered. But that's not the end of it. Jump into chapter 4. It says, this Simeon now, of whom we spake afore, having been a betrayer of the money and of his country. Exactly, because that would have caused a rift between the Jews and the king at the time, right? Slandered Ananias as if he had terrified Herodias and been the worker of this evil. Thus was he bold to call him a traitor that had deserved well of the city and tendered his own nation and was zealous of the laws. But when their hatred went so far that by one of Simon's faction, murders were committed. All right. So they started to turn on people of our own nation. Right? He went to the king not to be an accuser of his countrymen, but seeking the good of all, both public and private. For he saw that it was impossible that the state should continue quiet and Simeon leave his folly unless the king did look thereunto. So Ananias had to go and speak with the king to actually get things under the way, to actually quell Simeon from his folly, because pretty much he was causing mischief. Why? Because he can't overcome the righteous leader. It's always the ones that are seeking to do their own thing, or trying to get preeminence, right? It says, but after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphanes took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Ananias, labored underhand to be high priest. So not only what did he have Simeon to deal with, now he had his own brother Jason to deal with, who was working underhand. So behind his back, he was actually plotting to become high priest, right? Promised unto the king by intercession 303 score talents of silver, and of other revenue 80 talents. Besides thee, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochans. So imagine, he pretty much sold out his people. Said, look, I'll give you this money, this sum of money, as well as set up a place, for exercise, and a place to train the Jews to behave like the heathen. Pretty much, he was willing to bring our people away from the law, right? By at the price of him being a leader. Look at that. Always the ones seeking authority. Always the one fighting to rule. Right? It says, when the king had granted and he had gone into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion. You niggers. And you have these niggas today. You have these men who would stay in Babylon, stay Western, these Westernized Israelites, and stay in the Westernized Israelites philosophy, Westernized Israelites philosophy, as long as they can get to be the man of their congregation, as long as they can get that 20,000 views, as long as they can get, you're the man and you're doing good here, and you're the best, and you no one teach the scripture like you, and yes, Lord, and yes, Rabbi, these are the niggas, at the cost of our people, at the cost of pulling away our people from Yahweh Shem Shai and being leaders. They prefer, to do that than to have one's right. And guess what they do? They actually go ahead and they speak ill of the true men of the Lord, and say the true men of the Lord are the ones that are causing mischief, just like Simon did to Ananias. All right. Let me just get a few from the comment board. Luke 14, verse 11. For whosoever exalted himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Because these men are gonna be humbled, right? Acts 5, verse 36. It says, "For these days rose up Theodos, boasting himself to be somebody, of whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves, who was slain, and all, as many as obeyed him, were scattered and brought to naught." Exactly, that's what's going to happen. They're heaping on these people onto themselves and all these praises, but guess what? It's all going to come to naught. All right. Verse 11 says, 2 Maccabees 4, verse 11, it says, "And the royal privileges granted of special favors to the Jews by the means of John, the father of Epaminondas, who went ambassadors to Rome for amenity and aid, he took away and put down the governments which were according to the law. He brought up new customs against the law. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. Now such was the height of Greek fashion and increase of heathenish manners through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch and no high priest." So you see that at the cost of our culture, our heritage, and at the cost of turning away from our hearts from Yahweh Shem Yahushai, these men want to be rulers. All right. First Maccabees 5, verse 55. "Now what time as Judas and Jonathan were in the land of Galaad, and Simeon his brother in Galilee before Ptolemais." I guess there's more to come on that precepts. Keep precepts coming. So what for the for the support on the comment board. It says that the high priest had no courage to serve anymore at the altar, but despised the temple, and neglecting the sacrifice, hastened to be partakers of the unlawful allowance in the place of exercise, after the game of discuss came them forth. All right. Now let me jump down a bit. Right, not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all. All right. Oh, to 60. All right, I'll get it in a sec. Right, verse 2 Maccabees 4, verse 17. It says, "For verse 16, Salakia, by reason wherefore sore calamities came upon them, for they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose customs they followed so earnestly, and unto whom they desired to be like in all things." Exactly. So the heathen still had them as enemies. "For it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the laws of the Most High, but the time following shall declare these things." All right. So I'm gonna jump down a bit. He made a sacrifice to Hercules out of the temple, with money that he got from the temple, right? And all right, so jumping down to verse 23, right? So he undermined, Eleazar, right? So first we had Simon, then we had Jason, who undermined Ananias, and then guess what happened 3 years later? 3 years afterward, Jason sent Melanius, the aforesaid Simon's brother, to bear the money unto the king, and to put him in mind of certain necessary matters. But being brought to the presence of the king, when he had magnified him for the glorious appearance of his power, got the priesthood to himself, offering more than Jason by 300 talents of silver. So there's one wicked nigger after the next. All right. So he came with the king's mandate, bringing nothing worthy the high priesthood, but having the fury of a cruel tyrant and the rage of a savage beast. Then Jason, who had undermined his own brother, being undermined by another, was compelled to flee into the country of the Ammonites. All right. So you can see that, it's always the men that are seeking their own honor. All right. It says, so Melanius got the principality, but as for the money that he had promised unto the king, he took no good order for it, albeit Sotrates, the ruler of the castle, required it. For unto him appertained the gathering of the customs, wherefore they were both called before the king. All right, now I'm going to jump down a bit. Right. Right, so it says now, verse 32, 2 Maccabees 4, verse 32, it says, now Melanius, supposing that he had gotten a convenient time, stole certain vessels of gold out of the temple, and gave some of them to Andronicus, and some he sold into Tyrus and the cities round about, which when Onias knew of a surety, he reproved him, and withdrew himself into a sanctuary at Daphne, that lieth in Antioch. Right? Wherefore Melanius, taking Andronicus apart, prayed him to get Ananias into his hands, who being persuaded thereunto, and coming to Ananias in the seat, gave him his right hand with oaths, and though he were suspected by him, he persuaded him to come forth of the sanctuary, whom forthwith he shut up without regard of justice. For the which cause not only the Jews, but many also of the other nations took great indignation, and were much grieved for the unjust murder of the man. So you see what they did? They killed, right? So what he did, he killed that wicked wretch Melanius, killed Ananias for reproving him for selling the things in the temple. All right? Because what he did was wicked. All these things just because a man wants to rule. I want to be the man. I have to be the man on top. The examples are there. You and these men are back today. All right, these men are back today. Verse 36 says, and when the king was come again from the place about Sicilia, the Jews that were in the city and certain of the Greeks that had bored the fact also complained because Ananias was slain without cause. Therefore Antiochus was they say him weep, right? Right, and being kindled with anger, forthwith he took away Andronicus his purple, and rent off his clothes, and leading him through the whole city unto that very place where he had committed impiety against Onias, there slew he the cursed murderer. Thus the Lord rewarded him his punishment as he had deserved. Exactly. So the Lord pretty much, paid him back for what he did. All right, he paid him back for what he did. Now, when many sacrileges had been committed in the city by Lysimachus, with the consent of Melanius, and the fruit thereof was spread abroad, the multitude gathered themselves together against Lysimachus, many vessels of gold being already carried away. So pretty much the people got fed up. Whereupon the common people rising and being filled with rage, Lysimachus armed about 3,000 men, and began first offer violence, one Arrhenius being the leader, a man far gone in years, and no less in folly. They then seeing the attempt of Lysimachus, some of them caught stones, some clubs, others taking a handful of dust that was next at hand, cast them all together upon Lysimachus and those that were set upon them. All right, and that's the thing, because of this, you had, the nation became disturbed, all out of a man seeking to rule. Right, it says, thus many of them they wounded, and some they struck to the ground, and all of them they forced to flee. But as for the church robber himself, they killed besides the treasury. All right, so pretty much some justice there, right? It says of these matters again, as these matters, therefore, there was an accusation laid against Milanius. All right. Now let me jump down a bit. Right. So verse 44 says, in so much that he discharged Miscellaneous from the accusations. Right. So when Milanius was accused of the people, he sweet talked his way out of it. And verse 47 says, in so much that he discharged Milanius from the accusations, who notwithstanding was cause of all the mischief, and those poor men who, if they had told their cause year before, Scythians, should have been judged innocent, them he condemned to death. Thus they that followed the matter of the city, and for the people, and for the holy vessels, did soon suffer unjust punishment. Wherefore even they of Tyrus, moved with hatred of that wicked deed, caused them to be honorably buried. And so through the covetousness of them that were of power, Milanius remained still in authority, increasing in malice, meaning corruption, and being a great traitor to the citizens. So look at that. Look at that. All right. So just because, pulling away people from the Most High, selling things in the temple, when when the accusations came up, you cause innocent people to be put to death, all out of what? Your pride and your ego. All right. So at one point, let me jump around again. So Antiochus actually went to war into Egypt. And then it says, verse 5 says, now when there was gone forth a false rumor, as though Antiochus has been dead, Jason, which was the one who Milanius underhanded, took at least 1,000 men and suddenly made an assault upon the city, and they that were upon the walls being put back, and the city at length taken, Milanius fled into the castle. But Jason slew his own citizens without mercy, not considering that to get the day of them of his own nation would be a most unhappy day for him, but thinking that they had been his enemies and not his countrymen whom he conquered. So you see that he actually attacked the city and he attacked everyone. Howbeit, for all this he obtained not the principality, but at the last received shame for the reward of his treason, and fled into the country of the Ammonites. So 2 niggers fighting over power and destroying the whole nation. Look at that. All in the name of power. And still not getting what they actually wanted. All right. It says, in the end, therefore, he had an unhappy return, being accused before Atheres, the king of the Arabians, fleeing from city to city, pursued of all men, hated as a forsaker of the laws, and being had in abomination as an open enemy of this country and of his country and countrymen, he was cast out into Egypt. Thus he that had driven many out of their country perished in a strange land, retiring to the Lacedaemonians, and thinking there to find succor by reason of his kindred. And he that had cast out many unburied had none to mourn for him, nor any solemn funerals at all, nor sepulchres with his fathers. All right. Now, when this that was done came to the king's car, he thought that Judea had revolted, whereupon, removing out of Egypt in a furious mind, he took the city by force, arms, and commanded his men of war not to spare such as they met, and to slay such as went upon the houses. Thus there was a killing of young and old, making away of men, women, and children, slaying of virgins and infants, and they were destroyed within the space of 3 whole days, fourscore thousand, wherefore 40,000 were slain in the conflict, and no fewer sold than slain. So you see that? See that? And yet was he not content with this, but presumed to go into the most holy temple of the world, Melanius, that traitor of the laws and of his own country, being his guide. So Jason tried to take the city, go back. They didn't want unknown in our strange land, right? Then when Antiochus come and decide that, look, you know what? Them people are revolt against me. I'm gonna kill them. Him kill a lot of our people, and then Melanius, the traitor, guide Antiochus to the temple, right? And taking the holy vessels with polluted hands and with profane hands, pulling down the things that were dedicated by others, by other kings, to the augment and glory and honor of the place, he gave them away. All right. And therefore, it come that, look, it was because of the wickedness that was being done in the land, why this was done right there and then, right? So just because two men, starting with Simon, three men, so three men seeking authority, caused the whole nation to suffer punishment. A lot of death, a lot of displacement, a lot of wickedness and lewdness being done in the land. All because three men wanted to rule, who were not worthy to rule like that. All right. And then jump into Second Maccabees, what's that, 11? Hold on, let me verify real quickly, because that's not the end of Melanius, that wicked wretch. Right, 14. Second Maccabees 14. Right, it skip, there's a big time jump, right? It says, after 3 years was Judas informed that Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, having entered by the haven of Tropolis with a great power and navy, had taken the country and killed Antiochus and Lycia, his protector. Now one Alcimus, who had been high priest and had defiled himself willfully in the times of their mingling with the Gentiles, seeing that by no means he could save himself or have any more access to the holy altar, came to King Demetrius in the 101 and 5th year, presenting unto him a crown of gold and a palm, and also of the bows which were used solemnly in the temple, and so that day he held his peace. So this wicked priest came and offered the king gifts, because guess what? He know that he went to the ways of the Gentiles, and there's no way for him to become high priest in the land of again, because the people definitely would not have it. All right. Now it says, howbeit, having gotten opportunity to further his foolish enterprise, and being called into a council by Demetrius, and asked how the Jews stood affected, and what they intended, he answered thereunto, those of the Jews that are called Assyrians, whose captain is Judas Maccabeus, nourish war and are seditious, and will not let the rest be in peace. Therefore, I, being deprived of my ancestors' honor, I mean the high priesthood, am now come hither. First, verily for the unfeigned care I have of the things pertaining to the king, and secondly, even for that I intend the good of mine own countrymen, for all our nation is in no small misery through the unadvised dealing of them aforesaid. So he pretty much went and he lied to the king about Judas Maccabees, because he wanted to be placed back in the seat of the high priest, even though he was not worthy. And he pretty much, he pretty much twisted the story, and even the brother Michael Allah, he brought out a word today, well, not today, but in a lesson that he did, from the book of Acts, white walled, I think, let me get it real quickly. Because he actually smote him. Right. Acts 23 and verse 3. All right, Acts 23 verse 3. Let me look up that word. Right, it says whited, right? It says B says term applied to a hypocrite who conceal his malice under an outward assumption of piety. So that's pretty much what Alchemist did just now, right? He actually pretended that he was unjustly put away, and he's speaking for the good of his country, when really he was corrupted and was speaking lies so that he can become the high priest again. All right. Now, verse 9 says, wherefore, O king, seeing knowest all these things, be careful for the country and our nation, which is pressed on every side according to the clemency that thou readily showest unto all. All right. It says, for as long as Judas liveth, it is not possible that the state should be quiet. So it's turning the king's mind against, those that were righteously ruling the place again. There's always these wicked men, wanting to be on top. Right? It says, this was no sooner spoken of him, but others of the king's friends, being maliciously set against Judas, did more incense Demetrius. All right. And forthwith calling Nicanor, who had been the master of elephants, and making him governor over Judea, he sent forth. Now, it says, commanding him to slay Judas and to scatter them that were with him, and to make Alcimus high priest of the great temple, which is what he wanted. All right. That is pretty much what he wanted. All right, so they started to gang up against. They started to rally the troops to actually go and attack Jerusalem. All right, and then it says, verse 17 says, Slakia. Let me double check something real quickly. There was someone actually that joined them, and when he actually joined them, the he was actually put to death. Slakia, 1 second, let me just find that real quickly. Did I pass it? Just bear with me 1 second, Akim, Slakia. Because Miscellaneous actually came back and they actually put him to death. Right. It was chapter 13. I actually had skipped a chapter. Right. Which that is it for Alcimus, to show that he was wicked, and he turned the king's mind against the Jews, just so that he could get power, regardless of what it would cost. All right. So jumping back to Millennius, like I skipped a chapter. Second Maccabees 13 verse 1, it says, in the 149 year, it was told Judas that Antiochus Epator was come with a great power into Judea, and with him Lysias, his protector and ruler of his affairs, having either of them a Grecian power of footmen 110,000, and horsemen 5,000, and 300, and elephants 220, and 300 chariots armed with hooks. Melanius also joined himself with them, and with great dissimulation encouraged Antiochus, not for the safeguard of the country, but because he thought he would have made him governor. All right. So still trying to get that power, even though a couple of years back, he messed up big. He says, but the King of Kings moved Antiochus' mind against this wicked wretch, and Lysias informed the king that this man was the cause of all mischief. So it came around that, from all the years coming up, this man was the cause of the mischief. So that the king commanded to bring him to Berea and to put him to death, as the manner is in that place. Now there was in that place a tower of 50 cubits high, full of ashes, and it had a round instrument which on every side hung down into the ashes. And whosoever was commanded of sacrilege or had committed any other grievous crime, there did all men trust him unto death. Such a death it happened that wicked man to die, not having so much as a burial in the earth, and that most justly. For sure that you always had people who were traitors, and the Most High eventually, gave them a just punishment. All right. It says, for inasmuch as he had committed many sins about the altar, whose fire and ashes were holy, he received his death in ashes. All right. So he committed sins, about the altar, who's and that shows that when you do things against the Most High can actually use those same things to actually punish you back in the end. So we have the example of Simeon, Melanius, Jason, and Alcimus. These wicked men in the time of the Maccabees, actually got put to death. But they caused a lot of hell. They caused a lot of mischief and confusion and hurt to our people in the process of them seeking preeminence. All in the name of them, trying to get glory unto themselves. They cause a lot of hurt to the nation of Israel. And it's the same thing in these last days. You're going to have men who are, going to try to gain power, and try to, pull disciples onto themselves that are going to cause a lot of hurt to the people that they actually pull with them, and they're going to be judged for it. All right. I'm just going to read the scripture from the comment board. And then I'm just going to close out with with this. This is once again GMS End Times. What was this again? First Maccabees 5 verse 55. It says, now at what time as Judas and Jonathan were in the land of Galad, and Simeon his brother in Galilee before Ptolemais, Joseph, son of Zechariah, and Azariah, the commanders of the forces, heard of their brave deeds and of the heroic war they had fought. So they said, let us make a name for ourselves. Let us go and make war on the Gentiles around us. So they issued orders to the men of the forces that were with them and marched against Jamina. And these men were instructed by Judas not to make war. They were told to stay put. If you're familiar with the story, it says Georgias and his men came out of the town to meet them in battle. Then Joseph and Azarias were routed and were pursued to the borders of Judea. As many as 2,000 of the people of Israel fell that day. Thus the people suffered great rout, because thinking to do a brave deed, they did not listen to Judas and his brother. Exactly. All because they wanted to get a name unto themselves. They caused 2,000 people of Israel to be put to death. Always you niggas seeking preeminence. Always you niggas. No one wants to be content with their lot. Everyone, hey, look at me, I'm this, I'm the man. And if you have a spirit like that on you, you pray how about Shemi, I'll try to remove that from you, yo. Because believe me, it's gonna be to your own detriment. Just pray the Lord to show you what your lot is, and in doing so, pray Him to to give you the spirit to fulfill your duty within that lot, and and in hopes that you receive salvation. It's all about salvation. It's not about being the man. The man is Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai. To sit on the right hand or the left hand of the Lord is not our call. Yahweh Shai said to James and John's mother, said, it's prepared for whosoever shall be given of my Father to sit on my right or my left. It's not within my power. Roughly paraphrasing. So it's not about seeking preeminence. It's about doing the will of Yahweh Shem Yahweh Shai, pushing forth the right doctrine and conducting yourselves the right way in the spirit, in hopes of receiving mercy. All right. But these examples just show you there's always these niggas trying to seek preeminence. But with that, hope this was edifying. Once more, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai Bashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Shalom to the brothers in the highways and byways pushing this word now, sincerity and truth. The sisters, the believers, the helps, the hopeful elect. Shalom.